What is up, Unity community? Welcome back to another official Unity live stream here on twitch.tv/Unity and, of course, the official Unity YouTube channel. My name is Jackson. I am one of your community managers, and it is my job to bring you all of the live stream content you see on these channels. It is our hope that you come to these streams and you leave feeling connected with your Unity community, but also inspired, informed, and educated, feeling more capable and ready to take on the indie games world. Thank you all so very much for hanging out with us. We have a fantastic show for you all planned. We've got Eka joining us from Outerloop Games, of course, the creator of Dosa Divas. Upcoming Dosa Divas, which is very exciting. We'll be showing a trailer for that soon. But Eka is here to share 30 years of experience and wisdom in how to run an indie studio and how that might be different from creating an indie game. There's a lot of learnings here. We've got a fantastic show with a ton to get into. So we're so grateful that you are here joining us. If you are watching live on Twitch or YouTube, please be aware that this is a conversation and we want to hear from you. So wherever you are tuning in from, if you have questions, ask them. If we have an opportunity, we will try our best to get them in front of our guests. If you have comments, please share them. If you are helping each other out in chat, it's one of my favorite things in the world to see. But as we kind of settle in here, I would love to hear where in the world you are tuning in from. Regardless, thank you so very much for being here. We've got familiar names like The Bull tuning in. We got Alpha Arts and John Gray here. Gerbrinder, welcome. Cryptid Clues. We've got Golden Character Design and GLH TechWorks on the Twitch side. Great to see you guys. If you could so kindly, please let us know again where in the world you're tuning in from. We've got Canada, Kazakhstan, India, Ohio, the far off, the exciting land of Ohio. I've spent a decent amount of time in Ohio. Thank you, everybody, for pointing out the Unity merch. It was not meant to be a show stealer, but here we are. We have talked about it in the past, how it's actually surprisingly rare. But if you are watching this after the fact as a VOD on YouTube, take a look down at that navigation bar as you'll be able to skip ahead to whichever portion of the stream most appeals to you. With these streams, we do like to move things relatively slow and casually, informally. It is a great opportunity for us to not only carry on a conversation, but to involve you all and your questions as we go. So, get excited for that, because I am as well. And we mentioned it as well, that we're going to be showing off a little trailer here. So I think it's about time that we throw up our trailer here for Dosa Divas. And when we get back, we will be joined by our illustrious guest, Eka. Take it away.
No one cooks anymore. Food in tubes? Yuck. I'm so hungry. Hey, mamas, what's cooking?
And with that, please welcome to the show, first-time guest here, Eka. How the heck are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. This is very exciting.
Of course. I mean, this is something that I think has been built around for like 2 to 3 months of trying to bring you onto the stream and really find an opportunity. You guys have been hard at work on Dosa Divas, and you're your dev cycle and your marketing cycle are in full swing. So thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and say hey and sit down and chat with us. We'd love to get to know you a little bit better before we dive into things here. So if you don't mind, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Outerloop games as well, and yeah, we can kind of get to just feel a little more comfortable having you here.
Sure. Yeah, I've been in the industry for, I think it'll be 30 years next year. I'm old now, so I can't remember exactly. I think it'll be 30. I started at Bethesda Games in '96 when I was still a teen, 19 years old. I come from fine arts, so learned how to do like game art through Bethesda, and then moved over to a couple other studios. Been on the West Coast for the last 20 years. So California, a couple studios I worked there. So art direction, production, design, and then in Seattle now, where I worked at a couple other indie studios, bigger teams and smaller teams. And we started Outerloop Games almost 8 years ago with 3 of us. And then we're a team of 14. The studio is all remote. I'm in Seattle, but we have folks in Vancouver, Toronto, Beijing, Brisbane, North Carolina, San Francisco, sometimes South Africa, sometimes London, all over the place. Wanted to have a little more flexible work schedule after spending 20 some years in various studios and commuting. I got tired of commuting, so I like working from home. So yeah, art, design, production, biz dev. I do all our trailers, marketing assets, of course, running the business, most things except programming but a lot of things really badly, which is sort of, I think, what you need to do to work at an indie studio is do a lot of things as needed. And so I try to fill in the gaps. So.
Yeah, it feels like a jack of all trades in a lot of ways. You wear so many hats, you have so many responsibilities, you run an entire team. I'm really excited to kind of hear about your learnings, your experience over those years. It seems like in our prep work that you're a wealth of knowledge that people are really, really going to connect with. We had someone before we even got started, the Bull says, it's always great to see the business side of things addressed. People can forget that indie dev comes with manager and entrepreneurial responsibilities as well. And I know that we're going to dive into the difference between creating an indie game or running an indie studio and how different those things can be. But we're going to be pulling a lot from your, like I said, lived experience. And can you talk to us a little bit about Outerloop Games and how it has changed over the 8 years, I believe you mentioned, and the number of titles that you've released in that time?
Yeah, so we started the studio with 3, and our first game was called Falcon Age. And at the time, we were doing it was a PSVR game, and then that also became a non-VR game. So it's a game about raising a falcon in first person and fighting colonizers. Our second game is called Thirsty Suitors, that came out in 2023. From Falcon Age to Thirsty, we decided to grow the team to 14, mostly because while I do a lot of things and everybody was doing too many things, so it was really kind of taxing. So we decided to fill in some more roles so that we're not trying to crunch all the time, which was a big thing about starting studios that we decided to, I think about 4 years ago, we switched to a 4-day work week. And so we try to have flexible hours, try to have some downtime. I probably will still work a little bit more on Fridays, which is a day off, but I end up using that time to mentor and talk to other indie devs and share information, because when I was starting a studio, I had some other indie studios folks that helped me out, and because I didn't know anything, right? We didn't start with any money or experience of how to run a studio, because running we'll get into it, running a business is very different than making a game. So I had a lot of folks that were kind enough to share their knowledge, and I think that's really, really great about being in indie space. Everyone's willing to chat and give you feedback and share all the things they've learned. And that's something I still like doing. And, doing things like this or mentoring or talking to other indie devs, it's great to give back a little bit too.
Yeah, it's been something that's so heartening for me moving into a community manager role with indie devs as the main focus of our community, is that the indie spirit is alive and well and so generous in a lot of ways. And to kind of echo what you just said as well, we've had a number of other guests come in and say, the indie indie devs don't want to get to the top and pull up the ladder behind them. So it seems like everyone is super, not just willing, but eager to kind of pass on those learnings and that level of support. So it's really kind of cool to be a part of that cycle, I have to imagine. So Thirsty Suitors and now Dose of Divas on the horizon. How have things kind of changed for you and the process? And do you feel that you are still continuing to grow and learn even after so many years doing this?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I think every project is different challenges. Our studio was founded on telling stories about underrepresented culture and themes. So like Falcon Age to Thirsty to Dose of Divas, there's a cultural connection, and we always make games about food. And Dose of Divas is probably closer to Thirsty than Thirsty is to Falcon Age, but even with that, there was a bunch of new challenges that we fixed all the things we learned from Thirsty, I think, and then we made a bunch of new mistakes. And every project, unless you're kind of recreating the same game with the same team, ends up being a new set of challenges, which I think is what I love about game development. There's always constant challenges and different problems to solve.
Yeah, I think we've seen it in the chat more than anywhere else, like this fail fast and learn quick type of mentality. Do you feel that is still something that you're encountering, that like trying new things and stumbling along the way is the fastest to learn? How do you kind of overcome the emotional toll of putting yourself out there so consistently?
Yeah, I think, Thirsty was like 3 years, three and a half, which is the longest I think I wanted to work on a title. So I think with Dosa, we're doing it a little smaller. And then as we get into the next titles, we'll probably do even smaller scope or try to do something a little smaller. We tend to prototype a lot and just get it into Unity and get it running, play test it, look at it as quickly as possible and see, what sticks. And we also bring in a lot of external play testers to early on to just see if what we're thinking is good is what everyone else thinks is good. Because sometimes, you get into a project and you kind of lose your way a little bit. So it's good to get some outside perspective and fresh eyes on it as much as possible.
Yeah, I feel like it's a natural trap to be so caught up in your own work that you can't really look at it objectively anymore. So that outside view seems like it's going to be really, really important.
Yeah.
Unity community, I want you to remember that throughout today's show, if you have any questions for Eka, please let us know. If we don't find an opportunity to answer them immediately, we have a designated Q&A section later in the stream. And ideally, we can hold a number of those for there as well. But as we kind of settle in here, John Gray wanted to ask, how many people work in the studio? And I think we touched on the number, but what are we looking at right now?
Including myself, it's 14 of us. Yeah.
Okay. Very, very nice. Is there anything that we want to preface before we dive in here? Because we've got a lot of learnings to share and not unlimited time. So we want to be respectful of your time and energy as well.
Yeah. I think, how to come up with projects. I think, something that always comes up for how do you come up with ideas. Used to be, I have like a Google sheet of just random ideas. Ideas always come at the most random when you're not thinking about it. I think that's like the great time to come. People say like in the shower or while driving or out for a walk. And we use Miro for a lot of our design work because we're a fully remote team. And it's like Miro's a really great collaborative tool. And I have a giant Miro board of ideas that we just throw in. That comes up and we revisit it and kind of poke at it from time to time. We'll get into more about sort of like how do you work on, ideas while working on a project and those kind of things later, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And again, we'll be pulling some of these questions left, right, and center. So Unity community, if we don't answer them immediately, stick around because we will be showing them off later in the show. This entire kind of presentation, this conversation is going to be on the kind of guardrails of a post that you made on your LinkedIn previously. It's, I think, what inspired this content in general. We've got a link to your LinkedIn page that we just put in the chat as well. You mentioned mentoring. If people are curious and want to see Eka's work and what he's all about, please go and check out that LinkedIn page. But I think we should dive right into it. And I want to start with something that's really interesting and really kind of, I feel like, underrepresented, and people don't talk about it enough. And it's luck's role in success.
Yeah.
And I know you've kind of got some big thoughts on this, but do you think that kind of like a failure to acknowledge a right place, right time, right game kind of leads to a fruitless trend chasing? Like, is it safe to make that connection?
Yeah, I think I want to talk a little bit about that because I don't think it's 100% luck. I think you can increase your chance of
Mhm.
success or luck by multiple ways, but I do think there are certain times you are making the right game that the market wants, or it's the right timing for it, or it's the absolute worst timing because the game you are putting out has someone other bigger competitor that's putting out their game at the same time, which happens a lot, and your game gets overshadowed. So I think right place, right time does play a pretty big role. But I think also with each finished shipped project, you learn a lot, and you kind of learn about, okay, if what worked that time, what didn't, and the next game you work on with the same team. I think for me, keeping the same team together and having that same experience will definitely increase your luck in future attempts. And then really getting as many attempts at bat, if I was going to use a sports analogy, I think can definitely increase your luck.
Yeah, the kind of as many attempts at bat, as many swings as possible. Do you think that is kind of a key process for smaller teams to iterate, to try new things, to prototype multiple? I see a lot of times that people really get swept up in their one true passion project and just dig in deep. Where's that balance for you?
Yeah, I think if it's your first game, it's always hard to know when to stop. It's still, like, even 30 years in, it's still very hard to it's really, really easy to add features. It's really, really hard to edit and figure out what your goal is and when you should stop and ship it. So I think from my experience, what I see a lot of sort of first-time studios or first-time developers make is try to make something too big, or they try to make their ultimate passion project, which I think is fine. I think, if you're doing it as a hobby, make whatever the hell you want. If you're trying to run a business and you're responsible for salaries and employees or contractors, you do have to have you have a responsibility to make sure that they are paid and their livelihoods are taken care of. So, thinking about sort of shipping something smaller, for me, like, starting and finishing is the hardest thing. And every time you finish a project, even if it's small, there's a lot of learning that you can definitely apply to the next thing. And then instead of trying to make that MMO as your first game, make a smaller game. And eventually, maybe game 2, game 3, your team knows what they're good at, and you can try to attempt a bigger game.
Yeah,
Ideally,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that, excuse me, that that game jams are a good place to kind of get out those swings, those initial kind of prototypes and those types of things? We've seen, I mean, it's something that we as a community often talk about. We encourage people to join them. It's an opportunity for community, which is always fantastic. But we're also seeing recent success like Peak, which is a game that's really popped off recently. That was a game jam game.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a good opportunity to kind of get some of those smaller swings out of the way?
Oh yeah, I think it's great. And Peak is a really good example because I think it's both experience and tools and processes from both Landfall and Aggro. They put together, I think it was like a month-long jam. They came up with Peak, and they're reusing and are reusing a lot of the tools and approaches that they did on a previous game. So I think that's your superpower, at least for them. I think that's like, they made something that they're comfortable making in a short amount of time, and it was priced well. It's charming. I played it a lot. I'm still playing it. It's a great game. I think it's still selling like crazy too.
I don't have exact numbers, but it's doing gangbusters right now.
Yeah, I think there are over 2 million copies sold or something.
I think so too.
At $5, which is amazing. I'm really, really happy for them. And that's like, I think they definitely created their luck by their previous experience and working together and previous attempts at things that just didn't happen. You know, it wasn't an overnight success because there's like years and years of work to get to that point. Years, you know, with tools and process that they've done in other games. I think but it was a smart idea and a great name, great type of co-op experience. Yeah. I die a lot in that game.
I've yet to play it. I really want to. I just need a core group to play alongside. But everything, like it's additionally impressive to see its hold on social media, and like the amount of clips that I've seen, despite never having played this game, is a true testament to, I think, its success.
Yeah.
Before we move off of luck here, luck to me makes it feel like things are really outside of your control. And we kind of talked about taking these smaller swings and increasing your chance for good luck. Are there any other tips that you provide to people to kind of help them feel like they have a little bit more control, or really setting themselves up for success despite the tumultuous and ever-changing landscape of indie games?
Yeah, I think unless you're a solo dev and you want to work with a team, I think surrounding yourself with a good team and try to keep that team together as long as everybody wants to over multiple projects. I think that's really where you'll see successes. I think we saw a little bit of footage of our Dosa Divas kind of a dev process. We shipped in 2023 for Thirsty, and then January 24 we started prototyping for Dosa, and we started with all the same assets and white boxes and things in Unity and all the tools we built for Thirsty. So it was like pretty easy to do prototype stuff quickly. And again, with the same team of folks. So it's like we all know how we work together and what we are good at. And really, I read all the comments, which is terrible.
It's a dangerous thing. I think you and I live in a similar world in that sense. Having constant access to everybody who's curious with your work is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, and all the things that we're happy with the project, but like there's definitely certain things that didn't hit that well, and I read all of it. I think it makes me stronger. That's my take on it, at least. But like, but we're like, okay, so if we're gonna do the next project, what do we change? What do we keep? So those, I think the idea of luck and increasing your luck is a lot of it is like same tools, same team, games that you're comfortable making. I think, and then how can you position it better? What's the idea? I think the tool sets, especially in Unity for us, we've been using Unity for, I don't know, since 2012, I think, and built a bunch of custom tools since we started the company. It allows us to try a bunch of things without having to spend a lot of time starting from scratch. I'm not plugging Unity. The Unity folks didn't tell me to plug them, but I'm, big fan of our success. I think is also a big fan. I'm a big fan of the tool set and the stuff we built for it. And our ability to do stuff faster comes, again, with the same team and being able to use, kind of utilize our tools from previous games.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it a number of times on the channel that like using the right tool for you is what leads to success. And, in terms of if you were to be here and you were like, Unity's what we use some of the time and we use these other tools, that's fantastic. And the fact that you guys have your own kind of toolkit that you've created is obviously setting you up for success, which is fantastic. But I want to talk about something that you touched on a little bit here, if we're kind of good to move away from the luck side and talking about your team's superpowers. You kind of mentioned it a number of times, and you've worked with similar iterations of the same team for years now.
Yeah.
And you've kind of talked about harnessing your team's superpowers. So can you kind of just give us an overview of what you mean by that? I mean, I think superpowers is something almost universally applicable that everyone understands, but in the context of creating your team, how would you define creating or harnessing your team's superpowers? I
think after sort of the first project, we looked at ourselves and see like, what do we do well? What do we don't do well? And if our goal is also to have a little more sustainability for the longer, like what is our studio goals, or, long-term sustainability with the team, trying to keep the same team together as long as possible and not overworking. So those were the goals. We hired folks that did things better or can complement the things that we did. And that was our approach. It's like, we need a really good concept artist. We need a character artist, an environment artist. At our scale, like it's really like one per discipline. we have 2 designers and 2 programmers, because there's a lot of work on those departments. But when we're hiring, we're like looking at who can complement what we do. Let's bring in people that are smarter than us or better than us at what we're doing and can really fill out the team. And I think that's like, we were specifically looking at folks that were that had different superpowers than we already did, to help us get to sort of the type of games we wanted to make. So there's a bunch of ideas in there, but it was really to complement the team. It wasn't like trying to find the best of anything. It was more like, let's talk to this person. Do they get what we're trying to do? Will they work well with us? Right. It's like that team chemistry is really, really important, more than sort of like getting the best person of whatever discipline. It's like they have to be able to work together and collaborate together. And there's the discipline superpower, but really the collaboration is like a huge part of it. Especially because you make 1,000 different choices during, probably more, thousands of choices during development. And if you can't sort of agree or disagree in a constructive way, then the game's really going to go off the rails.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about like creating a team and the team chemistry and that sort of stuff. But I love what you said about not necessarily seeking out the best of everything, but the right fit, right?
Yeah.
Finding the person that offsets any weaknesses that the current team may have with their strengths, those types of things. Does it happen often, or do you have a kind of clear understanding of developing the team once they're already in place? Has it happened where you discover someone has a superpower they weren't aware of in the first place? And what's that process of exploration look like?
Yeah, so we keep things pretty loose. Folks are doing their main discipline plus, sort of pitching in as needed. So,
Sure.
And especially with design, like we do our design discussions. We try to build a game around the folks, what people on the team like to do. Like one of my co-founders, Azo, is our animation team of 1. So he does all the rigging and animation and tools, and been working with him for, I think, 15 years now. Whoa. Maybe longer, 20 years at various companies. He's an animator, but also in his spare time does parkour and does all sorts of like skateboarding. I think he's rock climbing now. So it's like a lot of the sort of his sensibilities for doing like really expressive animation in our games. I know that I'll just save a spot for the design or narrative where he's going to come in with some crazy animation for a cooking thing, or some wushu move for skateboarding that will just like, that's just, I know him enough. I'm like, okay, he's going to bring in something that's going to really make this scene or this level better. And there are other folks on the team that do that too. They just like have different tendencies and interests. So like we try to keep it open, and we kind of try to design games around the things that people like to do as much as possible.
With a series of different individuals, all with their kind of own preferences and, as we've been saying, superpowers, etc. How do you go about kind of bringing everyone together to go from a group of 14 individuals to an actual cohesive, well-oiled team?
Yeah, so we typically like pitch the game idea to the team and then say like, hey, what do you think about this? And here's sort of the direction that we're thinking of. And that will change as we get into production, but like it's definitely not a lack of ideas. Is like, do these ideas fit into sort of the direction, the narrative, the gameplay of what we're trying to do? And that's always like the call we'll have to make. Like, that's a great idea. Let's either save it for a DLC or a different game, because it's a great idea. It just doesn't kind of fit with the sort of the pillars of this game. And that's a big thing. It's like really defining what you're trying to make early on. And I mean, sometimes you don't know obviously exactly what the thing is going to be, but like with Dose of Divas, it's like 2 sisters and a mech was sort of the concept. Okay, what do they do? What happens? And it's a game about sort of familiar relationships and reconnecting through battling with other mechs and folks that used to run a restaurant together. So it's like there's a story theme, and then we figure it as we go, and then any ideas that come in or the things people want to throw in, there are plenty of places to be expressive on a smaller team. I think that's also the charming part of being on a small team, that you can see what you contributed on screen or when you play the game.
Yeah. Having kind of worked at, like you mentioned, Bethesda, some of these bigger studios, do you feel that this sense of kind of ownership and even camaraderie towards the project is deeper, is more strong on a smaller studio?
Oh, for sure. Like, I think the smaller the team, the more you're going to be putting into the game directly, right? Like, I've certainly been on bigger teams, not the sort of the current AAA scale, but the AAA scale, 10, 15 years ago,
Right.
where you have a team of 100. I spend more time sort of managing than I do actual putting stuff in the game. And now, even though I run the studio, I still get to do a lot of design work, got to do lighting and polish and cutscenes and trailers. So it's like there's enough balance of folks that's sort of managing, but also putting stuff in the game that I still get to do the fun part, which is make the game itself. So,
yeah, that's awesome. I want to kind of change gears here a little bit and move into our next topic as well, because we've got a big one here and something that we discuss frequently. Again, we're doing an entry into our speaker series, the Indie Survival Guide, right now. This was all kind of started earlier this year when we sat down with Chris Zukowski of how to market a game. And something that was big that came up was genre.
Yeah.
You've made your biggest marketing decision as soon as you choose what type of game to make. So I know this was something that you had some thoughts on as well, with setting genre expectations. And one of the quotes that I found from one of your previous posts was, understand genre expectations from players and find ways to subvert them or communicate clearly of what to expect from your game. In your opinion, when is it kind of ideal to provide that surprise, that shock and awe, versus communicate clearly and present with full polish?
Yeah, so I think this is a change in sort of games and trends over the last, I don't know, say 10 years, maybe longer. But like, I know at least as a player, for me, when I go on Steam and I play a certain game, I also want to see like what other games are like that, but also offer enough of a different experience, but in the same genre. We've learned this probably poorly in some of our games, like with Thirsty Suitors. It's an RPG about fighting your exes and disappointing your parents is what we call it. It's a game about the main character Jala, who's like mid-20s, coming back home and after a breakup, and then you battle each of your exes in turn-based combat. Also, there's skating, and then there's cooking with your parents to kind of reconnect with them. So a game is about reconnecting with family and friends. And it's certainly like JRPG inspired, but I think it's called Thirsty Suitors. Sort of the feedback we got were like, people are like, is it a dating game? Is it like a skating game? Because it also had skating. So I think, we threw a lot in there. And we're happy with how it came out, but I think it was really kind of looking back at it now that we've had a year or so, maybe 2 years or so since release. Like, we can see why folks were confused, because the naming, what's in it, how it's sort of marketed, it wasn't really clear if this is a thing they might like. They're like, oh, I don't like dating games. So it's not really a dating game. It's like more of a breakup simulator, but and there's turn-based combat. So like but the combat is all based on sort of moods and feelings. Like, you're, instead of attacking with like fire, you're attacking with thirsty. So like, it's a really creative game. It has a unique perspective, but also it might be too hard of a game to categorize, or for folks that might enjoy Paper Mario or Sea of Stars to play the game because they didn't realize, oh, that's also in the same genre type of games that I like. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that also kind of mirrors what we learned through Chris as well, in terms of like the finding similar games, because being able to explain to someone, hey, if you love this, you'll enjoy this, is one of the clearest ways to paint a picture in people's minds. When you are prototyping, how early do you consider what genre your potential game would fit into? Is it something when you set out to prototype, before you even get started, you're saying, hey, we'd like to make a game in this genre? Or is it once you look at a number of different pieces, you say, well, this one would be more successful because of its genre implications? Where does that kind of start?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's always like, how do we stand out as a studio? So the theme high concept is really probably the most important for us. Um, there are a lot of very talented game developers, indie developers out there with that make amazing games. And I think we're at a place with tools and team know-how that you can make just about anything. It's more of like, how do you stand out? So we consider sort of like our perspective, our art, our narrative as more of sort of the things I think will resonate well. The genre part of it comes into play depending on sort of the game we want to make. With Dosa, but then it varies a lot. So Dosa was like, we knew we wanted to make another kind of a JRPG approach. We took all the learnings from Thirsty and all the tools, and we expanded on the things that didn't go well, like the combat system, the cooking system. Everything's a little more player expressive, and that's been sort of our goal with each game, is to get more gameplay, get more expressive, be better on game design, while retaining sort of the narrative and the visuals and the music and all that stuff that we do. I think that people say that we do well, but like take all that, and Dosa was like a follow-up to Thirsty in some ways, and a lot different, but definitely more within sort of like a JRPG approach. If so, again, like Sea of Stars or Expedition 33, things like that recently, where we have timing elements on hits and blocks. We have everything's flavor based because they're chefs, so we still have like our unique theme, and of course you have a giant mech you run around in. So our approach, like, okay, do something interesting in the genre, but also, what's different about it? Why shouldn't I go play something that's already there? Like, what do you bring into the table? I think that's also the right balance, is set expectations about what genre, but also, bring your own flavor to it, bring something unique to it. Like give players a reason to engage with the world, right? And that's usually how, like, our art and narrative and also the design of everything is how we approach it.
While we're on the topic of genre, is there anything that you're seeing, or I mean, honestly, within your team, that you would like to branch out and explore genre-wise? Anything that you guys have not touched into, or as maybe something that's more tangible for our audience, opportunities in the market right now in terms of what you're seeing with genre?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think co-op horror is a thing that we would love to try, or just a horror game. I think we were talking about Mouthwashing recently, which is a game that came out. It's just like really, really wild. Yeah, I mean, with Peak also co-op adventuring, and that, I think they kind of broke out the mold a little bit, which is also what stands out, because there was several games that were like co-op horror type games, and that did really well. I can't remember the one with you're in like a haunted house one.
So there's, man, Repo.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Repo's great.
Well. Yeah.
Lethal Company popped off. Yeah. Phasmophobia has been long-standing now. Like,
there's like a bunch of those kind of co-op horror type games, and Peak did a kind of survival take on it instead. Like, I think and the art style and everything is like really great. So I think that, like, they understood that's like a thing that's doing well, because I think also Peak, not Peak. I forget Landfall's last game about the speed game where you're running through.
Is it Haste?
Haste. Yeah. Cool. So I think there was some, like, taking some of the co-op approach and some of the approach from the Haste in terms of like procedural generation for level changing and things like that. So again, I think they understood like what's doing well, and then how they can stand out, and that's a great approach.
Cool. I want to kind of jump around, Jack, so stick with me here, because I think this is just going to flow together. I think that we can talk about kind of positioning your game. Once you've set out, you've decided what game you want to make, what genre it sits within, how are you communicating to people that this is what your game is? How are you doing it succinctly in a way that's enticing? How do you recommend people position their game?
Yeah, I think there's so many games and so many shows. I'm not sure physical shows are completely back, but that was the thing, like PAXs and things like that pre-pandemic. So we're part of Summer Games Fest, which is multiple shows, right? Like we were part of the Day of the Devs and Wholesome Games sort of digital showcase, and
Mhm.
that's a really good way if you can. We just submit to every show if you have something compelling. But again, it comes back to for us, we try to think about the trailer. I actually think about a trailer for a game early on,
Okay.
mostly because when you have to kind of talk about the game in a minute of footage, um, you really have to be specific about what the game is. And
Right.
for me, I love editing trailers because it also informs like how we approach narrative or game design, and how do we convey sort of the big ideas in a very short format like a trailer, because usually a trailer or a GIF or screenshot is how folks will know about your game, right? Or Steam
Mhm.
page. So even like think about when we think about pitching, right? I think about sort of like the Steam page as a pitch doc. Like you look at the Steam page, there's like visuals and trailer, and there's like a short form description. That's your elevator pitch of like, here's a couple sentences of what the game is. Then you have your long form text, which is like, okay, I'm interested in what this short form thing is. Let's dive into like what the details of the games are. And so we try to convey essentially like that in a trailer format as well.
Mhm.
Um,
I like that. I like the kind of, can you visualize the trailer? Can
mhm.
you make it make sense in 1 minute to someone? Can you summarize your game to really get it in front of people that quickly? How big of a part of the artistic style do you think plays? How big a part does the artistic style play in terms of baiting a hook initially, right? Like if you've got a 1 minute trailer, there's no guarantee that you're getting 1 minute of someone's time. Do
Totally.
you think that the artistic style, which we see is so unique in Dose of Divas, as well as Thirsty Suitors, do you think that that plays a big part in it?
Oh, totally. Like I'm, definitely visuals first type person.
Mm,
So I think that's also a strength for us. We have an amazing art team and concept artists and character and environment art and animation and effects. So I think also just it's a thing for me also just to like make interesting stylized work. I know stylized gets overused, but and it's the spectrum of like if one end is like pure realism, the other end is abstraction. We're kind of with Thirsty, I think we were kind of closer to the realism part of the scale, and then Dosa we're kind of close, more closer to the abstraction part of it. Mostly because the camera is pulled back too, so everything needs to look better at a distance as you're running around. So the visual sort of approach is a big part of what we do too. So, and that's definitely visuals are the first way people will experience your game. So it really needs to every screenshot, every trailer, every footage. If you paused it, we were like, okay, could this be any other game?
mm,
So we think a lot about that, like in terms of if that means like running around in a mech with two women running in a mech. I think that makes for an interesting visual. And then that leads to like, okay, how do we show that, and what kind of art style do we use? So we do a lot of exploration around that too.
yeah, that's very cool to hear about. I know in your initial post that kind of sparked this content, you mentioned talking about the hype around pre-release and
Mhm.
the post-release hype, both being kind of similar but different equations, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any tips on how to generate hype on either side? I feel like we see a number of people that are like, oh, I have the answers, but it feels like there is no one answer that matches for everyone. Do you have any kind of general advice for people?
Yeah, I think pre-release hype because they haven't played it. I mean, watching a game being played versus playing, there's definitely a difference.
Right.
And some pre-release hype is mostly, I think, typically around visuals or high concept or both. It's like, okay, I'll bring back Expedition again. Expedition looks amazing, and it's made by a relatively small team and has really good animation work, really good, facial work, and a lot of detail. And that's interesting, right? Like that looks like a world I want to be part of, and I think a lot of that goes into the pre-release hype. Or if you've released a game, people know you for certain types of games. You're not starting from zero, right? Like
Hmm.
the Supergiant team isn't going to start from zero when they make another game or when they release Hades 2, right? Or
Right.
But typically pre-release, because they haven't played it yet, they don't know how awesome it is. It really comes down to the high concept, a funny trailer, the visuals. What is the interesting hook? If like, hey, it's a game about a cat. Okay, cool. I want to play it as a cat in this amazing world. Hello Kitty took a different approach than Stray. Stray was made by several ex Ubisoft AAA artists. So like just that first time I saw like a GIF that blew up on social media about a cat running through sort of like this amazing looking environment, like that set a tone, right? Like I didn't know what the game was, but I'm like, oh, I want to be a cat in this space. Like that blew up really, really heavily because again, like they use their superpowers, like they know how to really make compelling looking environments, and they put a concept of being a cat in it, which cats are kind of popular, I guess.
I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking about it, I was like, okay, so we take the co-op horror element, but everyone's a cat.
Okay,
and
there
I'm
you
like,
go.
there's something there. Like that might be, I would play that.
I think back one more thing. The pre-release hype is about an experience you haven't had or wanted to have, or it's like, oh, obviously this is a cool thing. Why hasn't anyone done it? If you're ever getting to that kind of realm, then you're on the right track. Like this is so obvious. Why haven't anyone done it? It's like, well, then you'll probably connect with a lot more people. Because the high concept, I think, there is a real world connection to things that you don't have to explain. If you can get into that pre-release hype can get in, really help. That kind of connection can really help pre-release hype, where it's like, oh, I'm playing a cat. Oh, I'm whatever. I'm a delivery person in Death Stranding, or whatever it is. Like there's like some real world connection to this fantasy that I don't really have to explain through some lore. So like the closer you can get to that, I think also gets into getting people excited. Like Peak, I get it. I'm a lost scout and I have to survive with my friends. Yeah.
Well, with the power of friendship. Excuse me. Don't know what happened there. In terms of the pre-release hype, because we'll circle back. I do want to hear more about the post-release hype as well. But do you think demos are a effective route to go? I've seen kind of both sides of the equation where people are like, demos don't move the needle in any way. And then we have things like Steam Next Fest where it's all demo. So inevitably it has to have some impact. Do you think that a strong demo makes a difference?
If the demo is good, I think so. And that's where we get into trouble. Like what's good? I think if you do a show or do a PAX or do a like Summer Game Fest or something, or you do enough testing with folks that aren't on the dev team, and you're getting really good feedback that people are enjoying the demo, that might be definitely a good marketing beat, right? Like your marketing beats are, as an indie dev, like it's, for me, I think about it like the announcement, the demo, the gameplay trailer, and release. Like I'm not a huge fan of like long marketing cycles because there's so many options people forget. So we try to keep it fairly short, but like those are the big beats that will get a lot of attention. Like the first time you announce it, first time you have a playable, and then then you can like, and movies do this all the time, which is like do different styles of trailers. There's a funny one, there's a more dramatic one, depending on the type of game. You can try to get audiences hooked on it with sort of a different approach to the story. But I think demos are a big part of it. I'm a fan, especially if folks don't know who you are or aren't sure about sort of what the game is. And if the demo does a good job of communicating it and they're hyped for it, I'm all for it.
Yeah. In terms of the post-release hype, how are you kind of setting yourself up for success there? It's out in the wild. People are excited about it. How are you enhancing the excitement that already exists?
Yeah, I think Dave the Diver is probably a good example. I think there wasn't a lot of buzz for it. There was a community. They did early access, I think the first third of the game for about a year. So they built up an audience, and there was a really, really, really fantastic audience that supported the game. But I remember when it came out, the reviews were really excellent. So they knew they had a good thing. They preceded review copies to all the press folks, and then the reviews came out. I know it's like, are reviews still important? I think so. I think still, like if it's getting a 90, people are going to pay attention, right? Like,
of course,
like if the game is that good, they're like, we get into this sort of like marketing and buying and purchasing things aren't like rational decisions, right? Like it's not like, hey, it's only a cup of coffee. It's like, well, sure, but like, am I excited by it? I think it's always like it's human nature to be, especially with something, if enough of your friends and family or people in your community are talking about it, it's really hard to ignore. Like I think word of mouth is probably the best marketing tool. Well, your game is the best marketing tool if it's done well, but like the post-release hype is, I think the reviews are important. If people are paying attention to it, if the reviewers pay attention, streamers will pay attention. If streamers paying attention, fan base is paying attention, and people are buying it, it's going up the charts, and that just kind of it snowballs into hopefully a viral or massive success. And I think the more people talk about it and spread the word about it, and like I don't know necessarily search for games on Steam so much, or even on the other stores, but someone tells me, hey, this game's great, and I'll like that person's opinion, then I'll add to a wish list or search it out. So I think if you didn't really do a good job of doing pre-release hype, the demo takes off, reviews are great, the feedback's great, there's a chance that you'll definitely find a market for it, find an audience, but also depending on how many, I'm sure Chris went over this, but wish lists and how important that's become, but sort of the wish list doesn't guarantee success either anymore. But it gives you an indicator of like, okay, enough people are interested in it.
Yeah, I think the kind of harnessing momentum is something I don't think that people talk enough about. And you talked about it in the marketing cycle leading into a game, something that has 8 years that people have been waiting for it. It's really hard to kind of maintain that momentum, but I think there is a clear course of key milestones leading into a game's release/launch, and then kind of carrying that into the time after. And like you said, reviews are important. I think the review of a friend or someone whose opinion you respect is even more important. So that word of mouth is so important. And I think, like you said, if the game is good and that starts starts generating buzz, it will kind of carry itself, which is very, very exciting to see. Is there anything else on kind of positioning your game that you typically tell people before we start to jump around on topics again?
Yeah, I think make something that you think you can make, also, or finish, the right genre. What does it look like? How does it, like, understanding competition also is a big part of it, I think. How does your game stand out with the other people? We always want to categorize things, right? Like, oh, this game is like this, or this game is like that. So like, know beforehand what people are going to compare yourself to, and think about how you can stand out from that too. So I think knowing the market, playing enough of the competitors or other games that are similar in terms of look or play style or expectation. Because there's also, I don't know if we talk about genre expectation, but like if you're making a farming game or a survival game, there are certain things that people expect it to be there, but there are also certain things that you can, subvert as well, if that's the expectation. But like, I think also understanding what your competition is doing, or other similar games are doing, is also a big part of it. So play some games, do some research, talk to folks. Yeah.
Isn't that a fun part of creating games, is that part of your job is to go and play a bunch of them? So there are worse things to do. And it's why being a game dev and being involved in the games industry is we're so fortunate. It's so fun a lot of the time, not all the time. But if anyone is just joining us in the Unity community here, we are sitting down with Eka here from Outerloop Games, talking about how to run an indie studio, sharing years of industry experience, both creating and managing your own studio, Eka, but also working for some other studios along the way. And we should talk about this because it's an important thing. And we talked about it right at the top of the show here. There's a difference between running a business and making a game. So when you kind of conceptualize these two distinct and overlapping concepts, what differentiations do you like to point out to people?
Yeah, I think it's like, do I need to make a living making games, or is this a side hobby, or is there another source of income, revenue that I'm that I can rely on, because it is like we run what we call a lifestyle business, and you learn a lot about what a lifestyle or a growth business is like, based on who you borrow money from. So if you're like going for like, hey, I need to project funding or studio funding, there's like different approaches to it. But running a business mean like, okay, I want to have a team. I need to pay them a living wage, pay myself a living wage. It is a lifestyle. That's my primary source of income. So how do we keep the lights on? How do we make sure we're hitting payroll? And that comes down to like, okay, how do I start the company? Like for us, I started with no money, right? Like me and two of my partners, but we pitched and got funding to start. And we didn't start the company till we got the funding, because we had full-time jobs. We're older. Like I started at 40 was when I first started. So like I can't.
When you started the company, correct?
Company, yeah. When I started the company, so got to pay my mortgage. The kids need to eat once in a while, so we can't really start a company without money. Occasionally. So like we thought a lot about that. It's like, it's not like we're doing games as a hobby, which I think if you're doing a game as a hobby, you can make whatever the hell you want, and just have fun with it. But like we wanted to run a business and pay people and hire people, and keep them together. Of course, a business of making games is still, the main business is making games, but like what type of games you make, how big the budget is, how much money it costs to make that, or how much money you need to borrow to start that, comes into play before really making the game part of it, which is the fun part.
Yeah. Like you said, that's the fun part. That's the reason that people go into the business, but it coming alongside it is a number of responsibilities that people typically aren't always aware of. Are there anything that is there anything that you see in a lot of new indie startups or attempts to become an indie studio that are kind of common pitfalls that people fail to acknowledge or be aware of ahead of time?
I think the team chemistry, but also overscoping. And then also, let's say you manage to find funding for your first game. What happens when this game launches and it doesn't sell any copies? Like, what happens to the team? How do you keep them together? So like those are the kind of the new things that happen. People are like, especially first time, I was like this too, first time studios were like, oh no, our game's awesome. We've been playing it for like 2 years while we're making it. It's obviously going to find an audience, but like that's becoming less and less likely. Or it's not just finding an audience, but like enough of an audience where you're making your money back, or enough to sustain yourself till you come up with a new idea. So we like early on, we decided to like also, I just assume our game's going to sell 0 copies. And then like, okay, if the game is going to sell 0 copies, how do we pay everybody? When do we pitch the next thing? So we start sort of earlier in the cycle while we're finishing a game. We start sort of the pitching process or figuring out the next thing fairly early before we ship. So I like to have the next thing figured out before we ship the current game.
Yeah, I think it's incredible advice and insight, and again comes from lived experience, which is fantastic to see. Something that caught my eye when kind of looking into your past comments and commentary on this topic is planning for if things go exceedingly well. How would you, I think for a lot of people, myself included, you would just assume that when things go well, you just continue and enjoy the success. What kind of premeditated planning do you recommend going into a game's release?
Yeah, I think the relationship you have with your co-founders or team is really a big part of this. I've seen or been in part of teams where things go too well, and there's a lot of sort of people like, well, where's my part of this, or where's my, like where's like establishing sort of like, if you have a bonus package, or if things hit these numbers, then like having that all set up fairly early on before you hit the success, so then people don't feel like they're on the team feel like they're I don't know. Like they were expecting something more and you didn't have a conversation about it. So I think having a fair conversations about like what to expect if this does well, here's sort of what we're doing with the team. and here's the cost of running a business. Like, you know, I'm not a huge fan of the sort of bonus structure, but like having a bonus set up, if once we sort of can pay the bills, I think it's great, right? Just like assuming that everyone's going to get paid a massive bonus, and you don't tell the team, or they're not aware like what it costs to run the project and what it costs to run till the next project, is a big part of that. Just communicating some expectations in case it does really, really well. And same thing when it does really, really badly, you know, what to expect. I like to talk about business stuff with the team all the time, and knowing like, oh, we're pitching this, or here's what we're going to do next, and what do you think? And just having those conversations. I think communication part is a big part of this, whether you're setting up for success or failure. Most of the time, I think generally it's like, oh, it did okay, but not enough to make the next game. So
Right.
figuring that out and setting expectations. I think setting expectations is probably the biggest part of this with the team. Where there's like
you
a
speak
huge
my
success.
language.
Yeah.
The communication around things, setting those expectations in terms of transparency, which, you know, kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of these things.
Yeah.
Do you feel that it's important to be fully transparent? Are there going to be inevitabilities where you're not able to be fully transparent with your team? And how do you feel that scales as a team grows and gets bigger?
Yeah, I think so the transparency, the team wants to know what's going on, but I think like I think about money all the time, and then like I don't want to like completely some folks can deal with it, the sort of the pressure of that. Some folks don't want to know. They want you to know enough. So I'm like trying to figure out like, you know, how much do you tell the team? I'm fine with telling the team as much as they want to know. But some folks on the team, and this is sort of like a case by case basis. People want to know like, are we gonna be okay? What happens if this happens? So like worst case scenarios and things like that. But like as someone who does the biz dev part, there's a lot of pressure on me to make sure that we are thinking about the future. And a lot of folks on the team that, I mean, you're asking somebody to be creative, but also know that there's anxiety that comes from running the business. It's a hard thing to learn, and it's also pretty lonely at the top. That's why I end up talking to a lot of other studio heads and see how they handle it too. And it can be pretty daunting to think about sort of like, oh, we're going to run out of money, but also be as creative as you can and finish this game.
I don't know that creativity thrives under that level of pressure.
I mean, no, but like, I think also at times I feel like the most creative things come out of having limitations, right? Like I'm a fan of limitations. Like, okay, here's what we have. Here's the circle we have to stay within. What can we do that's interesting, right? Like, and sometimes that's running out of money or funding or team size, or, you know, someone decides they want to, you know, switch jobs or decide to take a hiatus or whatever. I think there's a lot of pressure in that, and I'd like to be as transparent with the team as possible, as much as they want, but not like my every dread and thought every minute of like, oh shit, this is gonna fail. Oh no, it's gonna be okay. You know, like there's a lot of doubt that I don't convey every minute, but like the high level stuff.
Yeah, I think finding that balance is key, and that really resonated with me as well. Of like, of course you want to be transparent and keep your team in the loop, but carrying your own anxieties doesn't necessarily do anyone any good to share every single one. But having that outlet and being able to bounce ideas off of other studio heads and those types of things, that network feels really strong and really, really important there. In terms of people who make indie games, maybe solo devs that are like, I want to start a studio, I want to run a business. Do you recommend people go the route of additional education, taking courses in business and those types of things? Or do you think that people can find their way without that formal education?
I mean, I've never finished art school, so I started working at 19. So I'm all self-taught, with a lot of mentoring of folks that have helped me. And I'm a continual learner, so I've done like, you know, Harvard Business School online classes and things like that, and talking to a bunch of folks. Like, I think it really depends on how you like to learn. Some folks like a structured learning environment, like college or courses that is better for them. For me, I just like to seek out stuff as I need it. So I think it really depends. It depends on what folks need. But I think, you know, talking to folks that have already done it, it's a very helpful way to start. Just see like, because you don't know the things you don't know, right?
Of
And
course.
sometimes though, I don't think I would have taken I wish I started the studio earlier, because now that I know, it's like, okay, it's not that difficult once I know all the things. But I thought for a long time, like, no, I got to like learn all these things before I start. And
Hmm.
sometimes I think ignorance is great to trying out new challenges. I think, if I was younger, I'm like, oh yeah, I could fail and get a job. That's fine. Right now, it's a really tough time to start a studio.
Of course.
So I would, if you have a day job, I would say keep it, and make your dream project on the side, or figure out a way to do it on the side, and then get to a point where you can start pitching it, or if you don't need the money, great.
Hmm.
But like, it's like funding is not at a great place right now all across the industry.
Yeah. And I think having that awareness is also a part of making good decisions in terms of running that business. So
Mhm.
I think, yeah, it all kind of plays together in an important way. I kind of wanted to change gears here a little bit, as I want to be cautious of our time. And we have some great questions from the community that I want to
Yeah.
circle back to at some point. But for now, I want to jump to something that you said of your team is your most valuable asset. And I
Mhm.
wanted to bring in a comment from John Gray on YouTube that said the biggest problem with running a studio, in my opinion, is not being able to control people. People come and go, and most you can't really count on. They're not robots. So what I really
Mhm.
want to talk to you about, Eka, is hiring for the long term. It seems like the team that you've had, the core group, has been there for a long stretch.
Yeah.
In the process of bringing in and creating your super group, what are you looking for, and what advice do you have for bringing in people that are in it for the long haul and really align on goals and views?
Yeah, I think being flexible is the biggest thing. I've left 3 companies in my career, so I'm like, I fully expect folks on the team to move on when they feel like they need to move on, and I have to be okay with that. I am okay with it. So for us, like, how do we make this environment a place people want to stick around, as long as they want to? And then that's the thing we talk about with everybody as we do one-on-ones. It's like, hey, you're a big part of the team, but if you decide this isn't for you, then that's your call, and we're not going to be like mad about it or try to keep you here in some weird contractual way or anything like that. So
Hmm.
like, people are free to leave or start their own company, but like, we talk about sort of short-term goals, for their own discipline, long-term goals for the project, and then long-term goals for their career. Like, if you decide you want to start your own studio, I will help you with that. Like, I'm more than happy to help, to have you find your way, where you eventually want to go. Like, so I'm okay with people leaving if that's what they want to do, but also try to make the place interesting place for people to stay. So whether that's like, with us, it's 4-day flexible work weeks, the type of projects we make, original content, um, and try to celebrate successes as much as possible, and try to build a community, and try to stay in communication with folks. And at some point they decide they want to leave, great. I am super happy for you, and I'm sure we'll cross. It's a small industry. I'm sure we'll cross paths, or
Hmm.
if I can help them get to a place where they want to go, I'm like fully open to that. Which is like, sounds stressful as a studio head, but also I don't know if there's a better way to do it, for
Sure.
me personally, because having to, having different ambitions outside of the thing I'm working on. I mean, that's sort of how I started my studio. So I can't turn around and like not provide that sort of um, perspective for the people that work at the studio. Like, if that's something they want to do, I'm fully supportive. So.
Yeah. How do you get yourself into a kind of headspace where, with your mentoring and development of your team, knowing that inevitably that could lead to them branching out and trying new things, how do you kind of acknowledge that this is great for your team, but also in the long term might negatively impact the team?
Yeah, I mean, that's a thing that certainly comes up. I mean, I'll give you an example. We had probably middle way through the Thirsty development, we had a environment artist. She was amazing. Her name is Lisa, and she had an opportunity to go to like the company she had like had sort of aspirations to work at, and we talked about it. And she's like, "I'm sorry, I love this team, but like, this opportunity came up," and I was like, "You should take it." Um, and we still keep in touch with her. And she's like, "Oh, I have a best friend who also does what I do, is environment art. Do you want to talk to her?" And we ended up hiring her best friend.
Oh, that's great.
um, so like we still keep in touch. Everything's like amicable. I think, I'm glad she decided to do that, but also she, she had such a good experience. She also was like, hey, I think this is a great place to work. Talked to my friend, and we interviewed her and a couple other folks, and we ended up hiring her. So I think that approach has worked for us. But like, yeah, I mean, middle of the project, if you have to kind of have someone that wants to leave or wants to change gears, then it happens. But like, it's part of development. The same way as like, you think you design all these things and you put it together. You design all those things on paper, and you put it together and it doesn't work. Like, game development is full of that, right? Whether it's people changing careers or games designs that don't work, you have to be flexible and kind of go with the flow as much as possible.
Yeah. I think you touched on and you danced around it a little bit here, but in my own experience in the industry as well, the network and your reputation within it is so key and so important. I think you said, like, it's a small industry. We're going to see each other again. So kind of leaving a lasting positive impression of both your work and your attitude is not necessarily understood by everybody. That, your reputation carries, and being a part of a team. Eka, it sounds like your team's incredibly passionate and well aligned, which makes me so happy to hear. But yeah, literally your willingness to, as someone is departing, consider their advice on their own replacement, I think really speaks to the value of your reputation in the industry, right?
Yeah, it's a big part of it. I mean, I think all the business I've done, it's like just keeping in touch with folks at various companies, and opportunities came up because they're like, oh, they remember working with me or someone on my team a while ago, and that they had a good time. I wasn't an asshole, so great. Let's do business. Yeah. You'd
be surprised, but like a good rule of thumb that I encourage people to carry is don't be a jerk. And that's literally just, I would love that to be life advice for people.
Yeah.
But in terms of your career and your professionalism, if you are treating people with kindness and compassion and you're working hard, you'd be surprised how far that carries you.
Totally. Genuinely. That's been my whole career. I think all the opportunities has been just from someone I used to know or someone that's heard from someone else. Cause like people move around in the industry. Like it's rare to be in one place for, 30 years or whatever it is. So
yeah. Absolutely. Is there anything else that you kind of want to put a nice bow on in terms of the team being your most valuable asset?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sort of design work that happens when you're collaborating with a team, and we do a lot of play tests, and we kind of look at what we're working on. We do show and tells, and really part of keeping the team happy is making sure that they have a creative outlet on the project. So if there's a really passionate about a feature or a thing they want to do, let them do it, because that it's going to be more meaningful to them to know that they had a hand in sort of crafting the game. We have like designers by title, but like everyone on the team has contributed to the design in some way, or through an idea or the thing they make. So I think making sure there's creative outlets for the team members and that feel like significant, contribution to the game is a big part of keeping a team happy and healthy. Yeah,
absolutely love to hear that. And there's one more topic before we dive into some of the Q&A that we've had coming in here. And I think this is a big one, something I'm very curious to hear a little bit more about. But you said don't use outliers as a business model. Can you kind of dive a little bit deeper and explain a little further what you mean by that?
Yeah, so like let's talk about like Vampire Survivors, which is like I think it really defined a new genre in a way that it hasn't been done before, and it seemed really fresh. And not that there aren't what we call fast followers, people that take Vampire Survivors and make a really quick version immediately, and they find some success. And we see a couple of the sort of Vampire Survivors. I hate to call them clones now because they've changed enough. Find success, but like it's never going to be the same level of a Balatro or a Vampire Survivors level of success, because the way they approached it was not about I don't know the dev of Vampire Survivors, but from what I read, they couldn't find a job in games. So I think during pandemic they put this together. It was a passion project, and I love that that it did so well. It wasn't like I don't know. It wasn't like a market study of what's going to do well, because these are kind of things that typically publishers or money people don't fund. They tend to look at what's trending and end up funding stuff very similar. I think when Bellatra came out, there's probably like a 2 to 3 month window where card games could get funded, but then they come back to like, well, I don't think card games are successful anymore, even though Bellatra is massive. So it's like there's like trends and sort of genres that do well, but like I think it's really hard. That's like winning the lottery or getting hit by lightning. Is that getting hit by lightning? Maybe it's not a great one, but like winning the lottery, like and then trying to copy that success again doesn't typically work out. Depending on your budget or scale. There's a bunch of trend in AAA, which was like trying to copy certain indie games that are doing well, but they're like, oh, we'll make it bigger and make it more mass market, which is a thing I hear a lot from bigger teams. But those teams aren't as great as making decisions as a small team that's doing them well. So it's sometimes those big projects that are going to be like a AAA version of a genre that end up not really finishing or shipping or end up becoming as creatively interesting as the original.
I love it. I think we talk a lot about trend chasing and the difficulty that can kind of create here. So I think this speaks volumes to that as well. But how do you think people can set themselves up for success in terms of carving out their own creative space and distancing themselves? Like wearing inspiration on your sleeve isn't necessarily a bad thing, but how do you really create an individual identity for your project?
Yeah, I think put yourself in there, be vulnerable, about the things you like or some expression. I think that's the thing that's really what's cool about indie games. It's like a lot of the stories and the type of games are like things people wanted to see out there that they wanted to play themselves, right? Or I think with where we are with how tools have really democratized, is that the right word? Democratized production and how easy to bring, build something, bringing your own sort of perspective is the thing that's going to stand out. And then, I mean, I'm not saying like to ignore the market completely, but like understand what's out there and think about like what you really love and what you want to really do. And you see these great indie successes that are popping up that are also just folks. Let's go back to Expedition. People that grew up with JRPGs and wanted to see a version of it, but French and French stories.
Classically.
Yeah. So like putting your own spin on it, I think the things you're passionate about, because at the end of the day, when you make a game that you put all your love and passion into, the players can feel that. It doesn't feel like I'm gonna say quote unquote money grab or fast follow or something like that, where it's like, oh, this is a thing that I'm really interested in, and hopefully it also means someone else is as well, and there's a nice perspective to it. I'll say one of the things that like hit me real hard recently was playing the Consume Me demo, which I folks, go check that out. Consume Me is like an awesome demo. A very personal story from the dev. I think I also go back to A Short Hike is probably one of my favorite indie games of all time. I think it was one developer or mainly one developer. And the game sets expectations. Like the game says in the front, it's a short hike. And there's like one main mechanic of flying and getting to the top. And when you get to the top, like the story is really, really touching. It's a short experience, but really tight and scoped well. Also, like, my favorite game last year was Dredge. Again, a 4-person team. So smart in choices of like scoping to this team size and having a really, really unique point of view. Combining fishing, which typically isn't, it's usually in a farm game or, crafting game, combining fishing with sort of Cthulhu horror. It's a great hook. So I think,
such a good game.
Such a good game. Yeah.
We've been super lucky. Last November, we met with the team and we did a stream about their how they used shaders and VFX graph to create their waves. So making waves with Dredge.
Yeah.
Dredge was my game of the year that it came out. I loved it more than anything. But you're right, that team was 4 people and they played into their strengths. And I think from a perspective of a consumer of games, of a gamer, you can really feel the difference between a studio that is incredibly passionate and driven by their artistry in their games versus, like you said earlier, something that feels like a cash grab. People notice. So being aware of the kind of industry trends and how to operate within them is really, really important, it feels like.
Yeah, I think it's a craft, right? Like bring yourself to it, but also understand there is the Dredge team worked on a bunch of mobile games together in a previous mobile company. So they had all this, like they iterated a lot and quickly. So they actually had, it wasn't an overnight success, right? Even though it's their first game, they have a lot of experience working together. But I think it is a craft, right? There's a craft of getting better as a designer, getting better as an artist, getting better at marketing, and then also bringing your own perspective to that craft is what's, I think, could lead to a better luck and success.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fantastic, and I think we are just about primed to get into some community Q&A, if that works for you.
Totally.
We always put up this disclaimer that no matter who our guest is, they're never going to be able to speak with full authority to everything, and as a result, there will also likely be topics that they don't want to discuss. So we may bring your question, and Eka, if you ever have any issues with the question and don't feel like answering, feel free to just let us know, and we have we've got a lot of questions because the Unity community has been asking some banger questions today.
Okay.
Starting broad from the Bull, they ask, if you had to start a studio from scratch all over again, how would you approach funding and staffing? From your kind of expanding on that a little bit, from your learnings, would you change anything?
I think if I was starting that today, I would keep it as small as possible. And I guess it depends, like, do I know anybody? Am I starting from like as a brand new dev? It all depends on like previous experience, but I would probably do it as a hobby on the side if I had a full-time job, and build up a team or keep it very small. Because right now it's like, it's a rough landscape for funding.
Sorry, I'm having camera issues. I'm sitting in a hot room and my my camera overheated. So
I know that's like
I'll try and get that up and running, but I'm here. No one panic. Eka, we'll just we'll stay in on you for now. What was another great question we had here? Jihad wanted to ask a question about Dos Divas. Are the animations created by hand, keyframe by keyframe, or are you using some motion capture hardware?
All our games of keyframe by hand by our animation team of one. So yeah, everything is hand keyed.
Beautiful. We had people volunteering to be motion capture artists for you, so if you ever need that.
Yeah, we need a lot of eating animation. So if you want to pretend to eat.
I think possibly the least glamorous approach that you could possibly have to mocap, but you could get in there. We had Red 201 ask earlier, do you think that finding a publisher early in development in a startup is necessary?
I think it depends on your comfort level. There are a lot of folks that aren't publishers now. Like for Dosa, we're self-publishing it. We're funded through Outersloth. The Innersloth is a company that makes Among Us, and they started funding a bunch of indies, including us. And for us, we're self-publishing, but we're working with a group called Pop Agenda. That's like an indie marketing PR agency that helps outreach to press and all sorts of like pitching shows and things like that. So there are companies like that if you don't want to have a publisher, you can do that. But it really depends on what do you think a publisher adds to the team that you can't do. Typically, it's like they'll fund, they'll help with QA, porting, localization, and they'll do sort of deals for you, for the digital shows and things like that, depending on the publisher. And they'll take a pretty hefty cut of your revenue in exchange, which is fair, right? Because they're funding it. If they're not funding it, or depending on the budget, there's all sorts of like variations to that. But for us, we're comfortable with hiring our own QA team because they're all external. Hiring, we do all our sort of trailers, but like doing PR through Pop Agenda, doing localization through other companies. Even the publishers use like outsourced localization and QA teams. So it depends like what you think you're missing by not having a publisher. And really it depends on, for the most time right now, like for us, it's like funding is really the key. Everything else we're pretty self-sufficient. So it really depends on where you are in your studio and team, what you feel like you need.
We've got another one here from Outerloop on the topic of publishing, I suppose. Do you think that publishing a game in early access is a safe bet when budget is running thin?
Again, depending on the genre and expectations of the genre. It's unfortunately definitely a reality. I've done that in the past where we had to go into early access. But early access today is very different than early access even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. There's an expectation for early access to be a fairly polished game. And sometimes it is your launch. So you really have to try to communicate what's in the early access, why you're doing it, and what's coming. But if it's a reality, you have no choice. So it's like, assume early access is also like a launch, like a big marketing beat of launch. And, unless you set up some expectations, people just assume, or they'll bounce off the game if they think it's not what they expected.
Thank you. I'm still trying to work out my camera stuff, so
Yeah,
I'm here.
all good.
No one panic. Excuse me. Danny Chavez asks, in terms of hiring the rest of your team to work on the game, did you use some kind of platform like Upwork or something like that? Is it largely reliant on your existing network? How do you go about searching?
Well, when Twitter was the thing, we found folks on Twitter. I found folks on ArtStation, and then we had recommendations from some of those folks that were other people they worked with. Work with Indies. I think it's at the Work with Indies site is great. There's job boards. A lot of indies are on Blue Sky now too. So there's like, a lot of hashtags and game dev hashtags that you can find folks that you're looking for. But like, it really depends on who you're looking for. It's always great to get a recommendation. We hired a narrative designer and writer for DOSA that we just put a job posting up, and I think we ended up getting like 380 applications, and then I went through them with the team one by one, narrowed it down.
380.
Yeah, and we're a small team, so that's like, imagine like what some bigger teams, well-known teams are getting. It's a lot. So,
dang. We have a couple more here, and I'm still working on my camera. Joe Bigelow asks, what is the biggest hurdle in making a game that sticks out across all genres?
Ooh,
is there a universal challenge that exists regardless of the project you're working on?
I think these days it's like finding an audience is the challenge. And when people typically, for me, marketing is like 80-90% of the marketing is the game and the title. So like figuring out what kind of game you want to make, what to call it, what genre, all that stuff is like majority of your marketing. So like finding an audience, I think has been hard, and it's going harder and harder because there's a lot more games out there. And it's not just games, it's streaming services, is other things. People are, games takes up some time, but so do these other things, shows, all sorts of things. So you're competing against just entertainment in general. So how do you stand out, and how do you give a person a reason to play your game? So finding an audience, I think, is still the biggest thing.
There we go. Another one from the Bull here, who asks the great, like, thought-provoking questions that I think just generate excellent conversation. But what is the tough part about running a studio that nobody talks about?
How much time it takes. So assume if you're like a artist that wants to start a studio, assume like either the 50% of your time is going to be managing the team or production. Unless you want to hand that off, which I'm like, well, I started indie studio if you want to just hand the responsibilities off to somebody else. But maybe one of your partners runs production or business, and you can focus on sort of the running the game. But like starting a studio and running the business takes up a lot of your time, whether it's working with lawyers on contracts, whether it's working in accounting because you got to pay your taxes, And that keeps going. Or whether it's biz dev, or whether it's like figuring out what the sort of the scope of the project is and communicating with the team, the design, the production, managing the studio takes up a time away from doing your discipline. So assume half of your time is going to be cut out. And I think it's easier for me as an artist designer than it would be for a programmer founder. It's really hard to context switch as a programmer, I think. Harder than art and design. Unless, I don't know. Some folks do it better, but like, I think, assume running the business takes up a chunk of your time.
Well, I really appreciate you coming in to answer as many questions as you possibly can. I know that there's a great deal of curiosity in our community, which I think is fantastic. So what we're going to do is we've done this a number of times throughout the show already, but we are going to post Eka's LinkedIn page. Eka, I know you mentioned your kind of willingness to share your experiences, and I know you do a lot of mentoring as well. So everyone, we really encourage you to go and check out everything that Eka has worked on here. We've also been posting the Steam link for Dose of Divas. Please go and check out this game and wish list if at all possible. It looks very cool. I'm really excited to get my hands on it as well. Eka, is there anything else that you want to share with the Unity community, either about Dose of Divas, about Outerloop games, or anything in general?
In general, I still love this profession and love making games. We have definitely like recently hit a hard time in the industry, but like, I think, this is a great time to connect with folks. And people are so willing to talk if they have time, and they'll make the time. And, please reach out to me if you have any questions, or I'm happy to answer any questions or share anything I've learned. So it's like, when things are kind of down in the industry, I think it's a great time to, build up a community or talk more with your community. Yeah.
Absolutely love. I mean, listen, if you're preaching community, I'm here for it. Since my camera refuses to come back, Eka, we'll just get you to sit tight as we wrap things up here. But thank you again so very much, and thank you to the Unity community for being here. If you joined in progress, this video will exist in its entirety on our YouTube live stream page. Again, youtube.com/unity/streams. It will be conveniently chaptered out within the next day or two, so come and check it out. We are live on these channels twice a week, so Tuesdays and Thursdays most weeks, covering topics ranging from hard Unity technical skills or engine agnostic game development, business, etc., as we've seen today. Next Thursday, we have a stream that we will be guest hosted by Manu here, who's going to be talking about getting started with Android XR. If you're curious about XR development, or if you are actively engaged, if you're looking to get started or to convert your projects over, or if you're just generally curious, please come on by. That's Thursday, July the 10th at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and 5 p.m. GMT. Unity community, thank you so very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And Eka, thank you so very much for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with us today.
Thanks for having me. Bye, y'all.
Of course, Unity community, until I see you all again, hopefully you'll see me soon with a working camera. My name is Jackson. Have a great rest of your day.